Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Darsh.
And I'm Dr. Altamash Raja.
And welcome to Medicine Redefined,
a podcast where we will explore the often overlooked but necessary components of health, what we consider to be the fundamentals.
We will investigate topics and practices that can give you and your patients the best chance to optimize a healthy lifestyle. It's time to move the needle forward and put the health back in healthcare.
Before I introduce this week's guest, a quick story time brought to you by locumstory.com. Today, we'll be reading One Job, Two Job. One job, two jobs, red blob, no job. Elective doc, emergency doc, some in overstock, some in out of stock. This doc is too abused, this doc is underused. This doc can't get sick, say, let's try a brand new trick. For all the docs about to cry, here's an idea you can try. Look into locum tenens assignment, a really great option, you might find it. Don't forget, locums pays much better, and you can find assignments in any type of weather. With all this new info trapped up in your thinker, go to financialresidency.com/locumstory and use your mouse to tinker. It's here you'll find the unbiased answers you're after, so you can decide if locum tenens is your next chapter. All right, guys, welcome back to another Lessons Learned with my buddy Darsh. In this episode, we revisit our discussion with Catharine Arnston when we talk about all things algae. But today we focus primarily on spirulina, since the evidence is best suited for that one. We also revisit our amazing conversation with Tracy Duhs regarding water safety, quality, and provide some actionable tips that you might find valuable. Last but certainly not least, we discuss the key takeaways from the one and only Ferruggia, chatting about exercise, longevity, durability, with a little philosophy sprinkled in there for you. So some of these topics may be considered quote-unquote novel, certainly not something a lot of people know about, myself included. So I spent a good deal of time examining some of the evidence, and we share that with you today. So buckle up and enjoy.
All right, everyone, back with another episode here, another Lessons Learned. This time we'll be going over Catharine Arnston, Jason Ferruggia, and Tracy Duhs. So three very different episodes for us, each highlighting a new topic. So before we get there, though, any updates, man, with your personal life, anything with the wellness that you're doing?
No, man. It's getting cold, and I don't like it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
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 I hate it, actually. Interestingly, this is not what we're talking about, but I remember, I think recently I saw Dr. Andrew Huberman talk about one way to build cold resilience is to cold exposure. I don't know if you saw that on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't listened to that show. I think he brought somebody out and it's like cold and a stressor and all that kind of stuff. I got to check that out. And I was like, oh man, maybe I should start doing this. I just don't want to take cold showers and stuff. I just don't want to. Yeah, it's hard.
They're tough, man. And it's like, I used to do them. And then once you fall off the wagon a little bit, it's so hard to get back on, but you really adapt quick to it. 1 week of cold showers.
Cold showers?
Just cold showers. Yeah, I used to just do cold showers, especially like after the sauna, definitely did them because I don't want to be sweating for like afterwards going to work.
Oh, really?
So
now, this might be a noob question, but what about going from extreme hot environments to extremely cold environments? What do you know about that? Like, is that good, bad?
Good, from what I've heard. So I know like Joe Rogan, Mike Muscle, they all do that cold exposure straight to heat exposure, then back in. So apparently in Finland, like the proper way to do saunas is you're in there for 15 minutes, you go in, take a cold shower for like 5 minutes, and then go back into the sauna. You repeat that like 4 or 5 times. And apparently, I don't know what the like biochemistry is behind like exactly what happens, but it's supposed to be amazing for you. Actually, when I was in Tulum before our massage, they would do like a 1 hour session where we went into the steam room, cold shower, sauna, cold plunge, and then hot plunge, and then we did like our massages.
So that's intense.
And you feel zen. It's amazing. But.
Yeah. Well, as Monty Williams, the coach for the Suns, said, everything you want is on the other side of hard. So nothing good comes easy, right?
That's right. I like it.
All right, man, let's get into it. So, starting off, our first guest of this new series was Catharine Arnston, CEO of Energy Bits, high energy person. You could see her passion coming through the screen because unfortunately we're still doing these and for the foreseeable future through the interwebs. And, what were your main takeaways? What got you excited? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I've always heard of algae, always heard of spirulina, right? I think, the craze probably happened about 10 years ago, talking about superfoods and people putting in their smoothies, but never truly understood what about spirulina was great for you, right? Like a lot of people just use it because of just hopping on the bandwagon. They're like, oh, spirulina, I got to put in my smoothie. It must be good. So it was cool to really understand and delve deep into spirulina and chlorella and understand algae. I think what was interesting to me was that in Japan and in Asia, this is like a staple for them, she was saying, right? Like this is something that,
Right.
just like rice, they use it in their diet constantly. But here, we treat it as a superfood. We treat it as something that's like an additional benefit. Whereas over there, it's not really a superfood. It's just the food for them.
Just the food. Yeah.
Yeah. So that to me was super interesting to at least think about.
Yeah. I do wonder, never have been that far east, and I do have some friends. Maybe I should have asked them about it, like how in their diet are they cooking it and stuff like that. Because again,
Hmm.
we did talk a lot about it, and her company is building it into, as she says, efficient nutrition, and then these little tablets, which we did have the opportunity to try out. Again, I think first and foremost, what we've emphasized over and over is that we're trying to get um, most of our nutrients and micronutrients and everything, that all the benefits from food sources. And so I did try to look up to see where one might be able to get algae food sources. Didn't find any easy sources to be able to acquire that. Most of the stuff was coming in powder forms, as you mentioned, a lot
Hmm.
of the greens supplements and whatnot. And so if anybody has any thoughts into how they're incorporating algae into their diet, I'd be curious about that. I'd love to hear about it. I don't know. Do you know anybody who actually eats it over here?
I don't. I just know like yeah, athletic greens, like all these companies will put it in there, right? And put
Right.
it like part of a
Right.
green blend or something, or
Yeah.
people buy it, I guess, like powder form, like you said, and then put in
Yeah.
smoothies. But I don't know anyone kind of
Yeah.
routinely cooking with it besides like
Yeah.
seaweed, I would assume, and things like that, and
Right.
like Japanese cuisine. But
Hmm.
yeah.
So I think taking a step back, just kind of recapping for those who didn't get an opportunity to listen. I mean, I highly encourage you to go check that out. But ultimately, in a nutshell, so you got the two main microalgae that we talked about, right? The most
Mm-hmm.
evidence that she talked about, I think she mentioned somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 studies.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure if that's true or not, but I didn't go and sit through all the literature. But there is actually a tremendous amount of evidence supporting both, or not supporting, I shouldn't necessarily say that, looking at, evaluating spirulina and chlorella. And both of these are microalgae. So spirulina, which actually has much more the data behind it, is the non-toxic blue-green algae that she talked about, used
Mm-hmm.
as a vegan source of protein. For our vegans, also using a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. We talked about how
Mm-hmm.
fish, who are getting the omega-3 fatty acids,
Mm-hmm.
krill, and all the sardines, and where they're getting it from. This is the main source. The big hype that she actually touched on, phycocyanidin, which is about
Mm-hmm.
makes up 1%, and this compound, it basically mimics the body's bilirubin compound, and it inhibits the enzyme complex of NADPH, and it's through this mechanism that it provides the potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory benefits. So this is where the claims for a lot of the immune modulating properties come into play as well. There are other benefits that literature actually looks at, and I think the most robust data is looking at actually the basic components of a lipid profile. Henceforth, that's not the appropriate word, and therefore cardiovascular benefit. So actually,
Mm-hmm.
there is like, if you, for those, again, if you go to examine.com and you actually look at type in spirulina, you'll see that there's robust data actually looking at lipid profile, but cardiovascular benefits, and a couple of other metabolic maladies as well. There's some meaningful effects on overall liver health and potential immune modulating things that I talked about. So, for me, I was curious and I wanted to actually dive into a little bit. Again, both of us subscribe to Examine, so we do get some of the study summaries. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want to dive deeper into that, I highly recommend you guys go check it out.
Yeah, I thought, what else was interesting is what's the minimum effective dose, right? Like that's what nobody really knows
Yeah,
with spirulina and algae. Like, sure, I think it's safe to say it's beneficial, but how much you have to take in order for it to be beneficial to see these effects. And I think,
right.
Catherine also said there needs to be more research on this, and that's what she's kind of hoping for as well with her company, is diving even deeper to
Yeah,
get this research kind of done, so that
yeah,
we can truly see exactly how much we
yeah.
need.
So the one question I did ask her in terms of grams, right? Because I think that makes it a little bit
Right.
easier, especially if you're getting it from food sources. So looking at the literature, it's a wide range. For spirulina particularly, it's anywhere from like 1 gram to 8 grams of spirulina that you're getting to get some of these benefits. Again, that's a huge range, but there's some studies actually looking at up to 16 grams, up to 16 week studies and that kind of stuff. Actually, there was when I was reviewing the literature on this, there was a meta-analysis, systematic review meta-analysis published in the International Journal of Clinical Practice. And this was actually October of 2021. The main author is Fatima Naini. And basically in this meta-analysis, they look at 9 randomized controlled trials. They have upwards of 400 participants. And again, the dose range from 1 to 8 grams, and the supplementation period was between 1 and 16 weeks. What they were looking at is, hey, what are the benefits of spirulina on, again, antioxidant biomarkers in all these people? The issue was the populations in these RCTs were extremely heterogeneous, right? So you had people, healthy subjects all the way to extremely obese subjects. It's a little harder to kind of figure out what your patient population is and what's used for. But ultimately, what they found was spirulina had a net positive effect on antioxidant profile. They also dove into specific antioxidants they look for the purpose of the discussion. I won't dive into it, but we'll link it. So if folks want to look at. On the flip side, though, there was another same journal, same month, published in October 2021, main author Sajjad Moredi. And this one, they wanted to look at effects of spirulina on ulcerative colitis. So, again, Catharine talked a lot about different things. We're talking about cancer therapy. She touched on some viral illnesses. Some are hot right now, as everybody knows. And so in this study, because of the proposed antioxidant benefits, they were like, okay, well, how can this help with ulcerative colitis symptoms? And so this was an 8-week randomized controlled trial, had 73 adults, and they wanted to assess, they actually recruited folks with mild to moderate symptoms, right? Now, what they found was that the outcomes they assessed were, diet, sleep quality, mental health, fatigue status, quality of life, basically a lot of the quality of life metrics that we're fascinated by and we ultimately care about. And what they found was the net positive effect on sleep, stress, quality of life, all that good stuff.
Wow.
So it looks great, right? Yeah. Here's the problem. Yeah. They ultimately found, when you go back and dive a little bit deeper, you see that if you look at the pre-registered primary versus secondary outcomes, the authors actually switched them up. So this is a classic example of, and this is why it's important, right? We talk about cherry picking data as a big problem with data, but also when you move the goalpost after you find out outcomes, because you're trying to manipulate the data to make it look better. The study had that. And this is actually what, there's a huge reason that the folks who actually produce, I should say knowledge, talk about, hey, this is why it's so important to pre-register your outcome variables. And then you can't move it after the fact if they don't look good. Because I think when the pre-registered ones that were different. So I think she mentioned 2 words that are important is bad science is really important. And even though there might be quote unquote 100,000 studies for it, there doesn't mean that that's strong evidence. So I just want that to be a caution for people. Oh man, there's a lot of evidence. It must be good. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, the Atlantic. I think I sent you the article. Have you seen that article from the Atlantic? So there's a great paper that was just written in the Atlantic by an investigatory. Is that a word?
Journalist?
Journalist, kind of. Yeah, looking at research. It was different than the guy on the Peter
you did.
podcast.
Yeah, you sent me that.
But yeah, so most research is just terrible. Almost most of it was just really, really, really bad. The amount of lies, the amount of what peer reviewed actually even means, a lot of it you just have to take with a grain of salt. And, in the Atlantic article, they were looking at ivermectin, and the 2, I think, out of the 11 that showed ivermectin really helps with COVID, which they were just falsified, completely falsified. And so it was interesting. And, his main takeaway was look, any paper that comes out, there's no one really doing an investigation and actually taking a deep dive and looking at how it was done, how were the numbers written, like you said, the goalposts removed, so I think, it's important just to take any paper with a grain of salt because you have no idea really.
Well, so there are some folks, right? I think that Berardi podcast, I felt like, I forget what those people are called, that their job is to go evaluate data. And they're like these data policemen, and they don't get paid to do this.
That's what's fascinating about this.
I forget. A really good podcast on this actually is Peter Attia. He had John Ioannidis, the Stanford professor, on that. We'll hopefully found it and we'll link in the show notes. But that's a good read for people who actually are interested. But I mean, this kind of raises the question, right? This is so difficult for the average folk who are not trained in looking at this. I mean, you and I went to medical school, and we don't, even in medical school, we don't get taught how to. This is something that you got interested in, but Yeah, I mean, this is a problem. It really is. And the hope is that, people will do their due diligence. I mean, I think if there's anything that we can suggest, we're kind of going a little on a
Sure.
tangent here, but it is
Yeah.
important, is that if there is something that you are interested in, one, understand what your bias is, right? So if you're a vegan, but nothing wrong with that for whatever the reason is, but you're like, oh yeah, spirulina is great for you. Look, here are all the reasons why it's great. Well, first look at actually the good and the bad for it. Try to find the bad. Actually, Dr. John Barty, again, talking about him, he does something to counter found the opposite for his biases. So what he does is he's been using this technique called Googling the opposite. He literally Googles the opposite of like something like that and trying to find the ways to disprove that and then come up with like an overall thing. I think that's one thing to do.
Yeah.
If nothing else, if you do that, then you might have a broader picture of whatever belief that you might have, whether or not spirulina works or chlorella works or whatnot. But anyways, this turned less into a scientific discussion and more into
So I guess to sum it up, I highly recommend people listening to the full episode to gain a better understanding of kind of what the research out there shows for spirulina and chlorella. And if you do choose to buy any of this, obviously you can go to Energy Bits, use our code MEDREDEFINED, you'll get a discount. But make sure if you do buy spirulina or chlorella elsewhere, it's non-toxic, coming from a good source, because that is also a big issue out there that Dr. Weil talks about actually in terms of algae. So
yeah. I will say in terms of the chlorella, the other things that, again, some of the things I do wish that on that podcast, there were a lot of claims made, and I wish some of them were truly supported by evidence in terms of papers and good evidence. In terms of chlorella, the doses that I talked about, the data is not as robust for chlorella, but the effective dose, the therapeutic effect, seems to be a little bit higher. So 6 to 10 grams daily dose, if that's what you're looking for. Again, if that's what you're looking for. But overall, there's much less evidence to support this than there is for spirulina. So something is just to keep in the back of your mind if that's something you're interested in.
Cool. All right, let's go on to the next episode then. So this one was with Jay Ferruggia, who you know well.
Yeah. Dude, actually, before we switch topics here, the one thing that really, I think the quote that stuck with me for a long time, again, just feeding into our own biases, is when she was talking about algae being an adaptogen, something she said was, sickness doesn't show up at your doorstep like a UPS package, right? It grows quietly inside you for years and symptoms may not manifest till later. I think it was something to that effect. And I think that was such a powerful thing for people to appreciate.
Yeah.
She had a personal story for it, right? Her sister had cancer and was cancer-free now. Good for them. Hopefully that stays the case. But I think that's something extremely important for everybody to remember, particularly when we're talking about these pre-symptomatic illnesses that there's no detection for, right? Not in modern contemporary medicine that we have today. There's some suggestions that people have, and lots of folks in different spaces of quote unquote alternative health will talk about different things. But something that we really want to remember is that this is why it's so important to be mindful when you're in your 20s rather than when you're 50s. Because it's like Kelly Starrett said, it's much easier to spend 5 minutes preventing, like doing a little bit of self-care, self-love 5 minutes today, or you're going to spend 30 minutes in 20 years from now doing treatment type stuff. And the same goes for metabolic illnesses. Like, if you spent a little bit of time watching your nutrition, exercise, activity, stuff like that, you're going to save a lot of dollars 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now.
For sure. A little goes a long way. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Sorry. Go for it.
Yeah. No, all good. So we're on Jay. So you've known Jay now for some time, right? You work for him?
Yeah. Jay's, I mean, what is there to say about this guy, man? Relentless is the word that he tattoos on his arm, and you can see that. I mean, his energy, his passion. Again, dude, all the folks this time around, right? I mean, they high energy folks coming in and get you fired up afterwards. And I just love talking to him and learning from him. I've looked up to him for a long time. Good dude. So you tell me, what were your impressions?
Yeah. So for me, inspiring kind of stuff, man. I mean, he's 47. He's absolutely jacked. Changed, right? So I think you said like his goal was to have a 6-pack and like have the shredded abs and stuff, and so he kind of transformed his body. But doing that at 47, right, and changing the way that you've probably done something for a while and adapting to a new lifestyle or whatever it might be, it's pretty cool, right? And I mean, he said like at the age of 12, into getting into fitness and stuff. So I just think the biggest thing I took away from that is, like you said, just doing a little bit, almost like 5 minutes, starting it a little bit every day, and then keeping up with that, staying consistent will get you the results. And he's all about keeping it simple. Like he's saying, if you're doing a 20-minute warm up, something's wrong. You don't need to be doing that. So what I took away from that too is, like, in my own training program now, I'm probably, instead of going straight to the compound lifts, I'll probably throw in a little bit of those single range, just those quick, if I'll do leg extensions, maybe a little bit before I go and do the deadlifts.
Like an isolation exercise prior to.
That's what isolation exercise. Yep.
I got you. Yeah. So exactly what we're talking about is the sequencing thing, right? That's a tactic that he has been using for a long time. And what's interesting about this, man? When folks are in their teens and 20s and early on, and I think it's the case for, folks who are not in the coaching, strength and conditioning field, certainly, because you're not trained and you're not educated in exercise science and physiology and just like the dynamics of how the human body functions and for longevity particularly, right? Or durability. But even the young strength and conditioning coaches, myself included, I was guilty of this. You come in and maybe it's because most folks are actually involved in athletics themselves. And so they have that mentality. They want to be explosive. They want to be strong. They want to be resilient in that sense and their performance goals. And then people beat their bodies up, which is much of what Jay did. It's unfortunately what I've done. Guilty of that myself. And then in the latter years, it'll be like, okay, let's focus on longevity. And so he had to make a drastic transition in his training methodologies. And so sequencing is kind of what you're talking about, is allows him to kind of have a ramp up session. And then he talked a lot about execution and mastery, right? So doesn't go high reps. And I'm not talking high reps like 20 reps. We're talking like 15 reps something.
Yeah, he said 6 to 8 is where he keeps it, no more than 8.
Yeah, that's where he personally keeps it. I think, though, what I will say, again, for everybody, it's a little bit different, right? I also, what we didn't ask about is, I don't, that doesn't necessarily mean that he stays in like super, high load and low reps as well. Like, I don't think he's hanging out in the 2-3 rep ranges, right? Because from a CNS standpoint, that's extremely taxing on your system, right? And so that's potential for injury as well. So I think that maybe he didn't see this, but knowing his work and following him for a long time, I know that he probably likes to stay in that sweet spot of 5 to 8 reps. That doesn't mean he doesn't break it, but that's kind of what his approach was.
Yeah, absolutely. And he even said, right, like, you're going more than 8, at least for him, you lose that focus, and that's where that injury starts to happen, right? And I think that's where most people get injured, is that when they're on the squat and they don't really think about engaging the glutes and flaring out the knees a little bit or whatever, they compensate, use their back, blow it out or something, and it snap of a finger and you can get that injury. So
right, yeah. So you're not distracted while you're training. Yeah, it's hard.
Yep.
It's hard to be dialed in. Anecdotally, what I found, that at least from a personal standpoint, particularly because I'm doing a lot of supersetting, right, or not necessarily like back and chest or something like that, but even when I'm doing fillers and stuff like that, is if your heart rate's up high, right? If you're going from one exercise to another, like if I'm doing deadlift and the lat pull down simultaneously, not simultaneously, but supersetting back and forth, then my heart is jacked up. And when your heart rate's up, you're breathing heavy and you're trying to move some heavy weight, and then it's going to be really hard to get 8, 9, 10 reps. So something to keep in the back of your mind. Not necessarily suggesting that everybody swap up your training regimen if what you're doing is working for you. Then that's awesome. But if it's not, maybe something to consider.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else? I think for me, I'll say keeping it simple, I think was the key that I learned from him, right? When we talk about influencing change and behavior, obviously we as a species, I think, can be weak a lot of times. It's tough for us to get motivated. It's tough for us I think we understand that success is at the doorstep. It's just hard for us to put in the work to get there. And so it's really key, right? And he talks about nutrition and weights, and you have to dial in, right? But again, keeping it simple for him. He had made a recent post about 3 simple things to get in better shape. 1 was eating less calories. 2 was lifting for muscle, and then 3, getting enough deep sleep. And it works. That's what I did for the last 2 months. It's that's what I realized, is try to keep it simple.
Basics. Yeah, I think the general philosophy is just trying to extract as much wisdom, which was what we were trying to do, right? And we're trying to get a hodgepodge.
Hmm.
We had limited time with him. Hopefully someday he'll come back and we can dive deeper into any one of the topics that we talked about a lot. One of the things that stuck with me that he talked about, I think towards the end of it, when he mentioned that how today he learned so much more from a loss. I think he gave a quick example of how he lost, maybe I think it was business related. He had a big loss and he said to himself, man, I love this. And I think that one of the key attributes to people who are at his stage, folks like future guests coming up that we have, you know, when they have a setback, their perspective on is how do I get better from this, right? How can I prevent this from happening? It
Hmm.
kind of reminds me of this Nelson Mandela quote. I think it says, I never lose. I either win or I learn. I
Hmm.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of the perspective that he had, which is awesome. I think so
Yeah.
many people are kind of like when they have a failure or a setback, they're just like, oh man, this is, it's not so good. I just wrapped up this book, which I cannot recommend it enough. Think Again by Adam Grant.
Mm.
And in it, and towards the end, actionable tips, he's talking about, it's better to evaluate your outcomes based on your processes than your results.
Hmm.
And he says that if you have a good outcome based off of bad process, that's just luck, right?
Right.
But if you have a bad outcome based off of a great process, that's a smart experiment.
Hmm.
Um,
I like
and I
that.
love that, man. But I think like you said, everybody's so goal oriented in today's day. Is
Hmm.
we're not process oriented, just
Right.
treated that way.
Looking at the
You know,
outcome. Absolutely. Cool. So yeah, overall, I think this was just a episode full of wisdom. I think people will gain a lot of it in terms of just understanding longevity, mastering execution, but then also he talks at the end a little bit about building a successful brand, and how he did that. So a lot of wisdom overall.
I do have one specific or two quick things to mention in terms of
Yeah.
longevity walking. When we asked him about cardiovascular side, one of the things in his training specifically he talked about is rarely now he does cardio. If you guys follow his
Hmm.
or get his newsletter, he's kind of stopped that for himself. And when I asked him specifically, hey, when we're looking at durability in your 70s and 80s, he said just walking. Walking is the best thing. And so again, there's an opportunity cost for everything. So I just started playing tennis. And I'm like, well, I don't know if
Nice.
I want to do tennis and train 3 days a week and also do zone 2 and swimming and just getting distracted. And I was like, okay, well, where am I going to get my benefit for health, right? And so if you look at it, the evidence for just simple walking is incredible. So two quick studies that come to mind. Looking at literature, there's this one actually just published in JAMA, very, very awesome journal, right? September 2021. And they basically look at daily steps and all-cause mortality. And the first author is Amanda Peluche. And the idea is, again, there are no national guidelines for physical activity looking at step counts as a public health target, right, due to limited evidence. And so in this one, they wanted to demonstrate the association between step volume and clinical outcomes, long-term outcomes. So they had a little over 2,000 participants in this prospective cohort study. They gave these participants an accelerometer between the years of 2005, 2006, and basically for 7 consecutive days they had to wear it. They included everybody who at least had it on for 10 hours a day for a minimum of 3 days. All the participants they grouped them in 3 groups. So, or the step count was classified in 3 things. So you had low step count, less than 7,000 steps per day, a moderate step count, 7 to 10,000, and then high, greater than 10,000. And the main outcome was all-cause mortality. They followed after like up to 11 years. They followed these people. What they found was the moderate and high step group volume groups had a significantly lower risk of mortality than the low group, right? But interestingly, taking more than 10,000 steps wasn't associated with further reduction of mortality risk.
Gotcha.
So what this tells me is, hey, like there's that sweet spot. So, taking away obviously the limitations of observational studies and correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation and the confounding stuff, which they
Hmm.
try to control for. The minimum effective dose for those, if you're trying to think about how many steps you're getting, seems to be around 7,000 steps per day in that range of 7 to 10. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that's the one change that I've made. I'm wearing my Apple Watch at all times. I know you got your Whoop on. Does
Hmm.
your Whoop give you steps data? I'm sure it does, right?
No, no step data. Just use
What?
my iPhone for that. Yeah, it's just strain. Yeah, there's no steps. At least as of now.
Oh,
I'm sure they might include it later on. I don't know.
that's shocking to me. That's actually shocking to me.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I don't always have my iPhone on me, but at least the watch gives me a sense. So I do like that. The problem with the watch though is if I'm not taking steps and I'm just moving my hand, I think because
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so it counts as
You're
that.
in
So
there.
it's kind of falsified.
Gotcha.
So I got to shoot for like 11,000.
Gotcha.
But this wasn't it, man. So again, there's a lot of literature looking at that. Here's another quick one, real quick. Um, Another study published this year in February 2021, they looked at daily step count and postprandial fat metabolism. Right. First author is Burton in Medicine and Science Supports Exercise. So very good journal again from ACSM. And the concept behind it was that there is something called exercise resistance, right? So we know that exercise can improve a lot of metabolic parameters, right? Particularly following a meal, but they can be negated if you're not active when you're not doing exercise. So in this study, it was randomized control trials in this review. It was tiny. They had like 10 participants and they basically had 3 5-day interventions, and they had a controlled activity group, 2 days of less steps. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Basically, like the controlled activity was 10,000 steps per day. And what they found was that the normal group that actually did more activity versus the low and limited groups, the normal group saw increased postprandial triglycerides, right? Low and limited groups saw increases in postprandial triglycerides, but the normal group didn't. And the total body fat oxidation was lower in the less active group. So what did that tell us? I think that a lot of times people think that, there's the active couch potato, right? This concept of the active, like, hey, I get my hour of gym a day and I train, but if you're not active throughout the rest of the day, you're going to have reductions in your body fat oxidation and long-term health when we're looking at metabolic markers. So it supports the concept of NEAT. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those folks who don't know, it's, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Basically, you're not just walking to your car to go to work and stuff like that. Try to incorporate more activity through the day. And what that might mean is just when you get to the gym, not trying to find the closest spot to the door, just park a little further away, right? Get a couple extra steps and that kind of stuff. Something that's super important because, one could convince themselves that they're being super healthy and doing exercise. And they're like, well, why am I not losing weight and stuff like that? But if you've exercised a lot and then the rest of your activity throughout the day has gone down, at least some of the literature supports that maybe that's going to be much more challenging if you're not meeting your BMI and fat loss goals.
Like that's key, man. And like one of the things I've started doing now is like after I have a meal, maybe at work, I'll like try to do like a 10-minute walk outside if I can, after like eating. And obviously there's more benefits to that maybe we'll talk about in a later episode. But that way, at least I'm getting some steps in, bringing the glucose down a little bit in the spikes. But so yeah, it's just an easy way to habit stack.
I love that. That's a word. We're going to talk about that very soon, actually.
Yeah.
But no, there's actually evidence supporting that too. And actually in cultures, I would say the Eastern cultures, that's a thing, right? You eat and you walk, right? And we know this, but even the Far East cultures, you get your steps immediately after. But yeah, more for future episode.
Cool. And tennis, I like it, man. Let me know if you need lessons. I used to teach.
You know what I do need? I do need recommendations for a racket and some tennis shoes.
Got you. Yeah, man. Interestingly, for the Whoop, the highest category for strain has been tennis amongst all members. So it's a great activity to have to get your strain up. So
love it.
Cool. All right, on to our third episode here. So all the good energies were here, all the good vibes with Tracy Duhs. Awesome person talking about water and hydration. So I came in a little bit knowing some of the stuff that she was talking about, but how about you?
This is truly beginner's mind for me, right? Coming in and not having, look, what's crazy about it is water, right? It's like, one of the most foundational things that you can have, without it, you can't survive, and something you take for granted. And so, but there were a lot of interesting things that we talked about in terms of, things that we didn't appreciate, right? I mean, she talked about the natural state of water waxing and waning, and we still don't have a clear understanding of what that means and how to go about that. But something that she emphasized quite a bit were the various minerals that are contained, however, stripped and there are other compounds that might be added back. Some of them, listen, we talked about this. They're necessary, right? I mean, the development of the modern world largely hinged on at least adding some of these back, right? Where today we can live into our 50s even and beyond because we're not getting these parasitic illnesses. So I think my favorite thing that we talked about is kind of how she characterizes their good, better, and best practices, or you might have said that actually. I really like that. I know that this was maybe like if we're using the quote unquote 80-20 rule, this might be in the back 20% of it. Depends. For some people, it might be more than the 20%. But I do think it's important when we're talking about quote unquote optimization and just how can you be healthier. Something to pay attention to for sure. But yeah, that's kind of what I took away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, water, something you put in your body every single day.
Right.
And we don't think twice about it when we probably should, after listening to this episode about quality. And I mean, we can take this any direction. I think the biggest thing too was the reason I got into water was one, I listened to Tracy on a podcast, and then I've seen episode 2 of Down to Earth on Netflix, where Zac Efron and Darren Oren go to Europe and, see Europe's practices with water and how it's way better than what we do here in the US.
Yeah.
So that's what really got me. That's why I bought a Berkey water filter. So that's how I kind of went from good to better. So, just learning about which waters are good for you, even like water bottles, right? The plastic. And she even mentioned some of them. And if you follow Tracy on her Instagram, she's always posting pictures about which water bottles to kind of get if you're in need. But yeah, I think so. What else got me into it? I looked up my zip code on the EWG website to see what contaminants, and that shit scared me. You see like all these chemicals, and of course they're in parts per billion. But you start to think about, man, you're drinking water every day. This stuff, does it accumulate in my body? And if there's an easy fix, why not use it, right? So spending that $200-$400 one time, getting a nice water filter so that these contaminants can get filtered out is what really got me going.
Yeah, I think that is important. But at the same time, again, we talked to her about this. We asked her, we don't want people to freak out because I think this isn't at the point where if it was going to be toxic to your health immediately. But you're right. What we don't know is the cumulative dose after many, 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 many years, right? This is what I didn't actually do. I didn't look at the evidence behind this. If there is data to support that, I wonder if there is. EWG, again, awesome source. They've got actually a tap water database, and you punch in your zip codes just like you did. They actually also have some water filter guides and stuff like that. I know that you have the Berkey that I'm kind of looking into as well, but that's not inexpensive. I mean, we're talking a minimum of 150 to 200, which again, it's not a tiny amount depending on what your situation is. So according to EWG, they sometimes to recommend that just the pitcher filters are sufficient. It's better than nothing. Those could be up to $15-$20. Maybe you can swing that. There's some other cool sources too, though. You can just simply Google your city, your town, and your city ordinance has to print like a PDF or something, and you can find that. There's a website that I came across, at least where we live, the Department of Environmental Protection. They have data for your city and susceptibility to contamination. Unfortunately, they don't give you the actual contamination, but it's just data that you can potentially look at. And then I think if you use that in conjunction with EWG, maybe you can be a bit more informed about what you're putting in your body, as you said. There's another resource I came across called tapsafe.org. We'll link all this. And they also evaluate the safety and quality of your drinking water. Unfortunately, the two places that I live in, the data is not conclusive. It's like not enough data to make it okay, great. You know what I mean? So maybe some of the bigger cities, they might have that. So there's a lot out there. That people can kind of check it out. But I do want to caution people, please don't freak out. You will not die. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what's going to happen, but you probably will be okay. But it's definitely piqued my curiosity. I'll say that.
Absolutely. And it's funny, man. I told a lot of people, oh, we're having a podcast episode on water. And they're like, oh, what'd you talk about? And I was like, just all this stuff, but also kind of H3O2, right? And people are like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, this kind of sounds like bogus. What is this? I'm like, well, actually, there's a whole laboratory doing research on this, the Pollock Lab at University of Washington, I believe. And it's interesting. So there's H2O, obviously, that people know as water. But apparently in nature, water is a little bit more alive and it likes to flow in a spiral shape. So it gets vortexed. And the reason it does that, it quote unquote contains more information. Now, what that information means or is basically frequencies, right? And so Tracy kind of talks about the like electrical orbit that we learn in chemistry, like the -2, -1, all the different positions of those electrons. And so I found it pretty fascinating to kind of see, hey, what's this? Where's this research? What's the outcome going to happen? So they're currently doing research on it. And that's kind of how you take your water practice to the best. You can buy a vortexing machine that will filter your water and kind of just put it in a vortex shape and spiral down into your glass. So you're drinking more alive water, or easy water is what it's called.
Now, what's the range for those types of devices? What do they look like?
Yeah, so you can get like a handheld one. That's probably I would say like $50 to $100. It's a lot smaller.
Hmm.
There's one that's like $1,000 though that you can get where the water goes onto like a gold crystal, and once it hits that crystal, it crystallizes and forms that crystalline structure along with being vortex, and that thing's like $1,000. But that's probably like the best one out there. So
Wow.
they range, yeah, anywhere from like 50 probably
Yeah,
to
that's a big range.
3,000.
The
Yeah.
handheld device, I don't know how much you know about it. I gotta look it up. Is that like a one-time use? Like it's 8 ounces that you'll kind of do it that way, or how does that work exactly?
So it's just like a steel kind of handheld device. You just
Hmm.
hold it, you put the water through it, and then it'll just vortex out. So you can use it all the time. It's not a
Interesting.
one time. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, and I don't think that we actually dove deeper into the science. I think I do
Right.
recommend people, if you are interested in this stuff, to check out her podcast. She brings some brilliant guests on,
Hmm.
and they're really getting the nitty gritty. We try to avoid getting into the weeds. Honestly, I did because I would have looked extremely foolish. I'm not going to lie about that. I know very little chemistry. Um, but something that again piqued my interest was she talked about hydrogen water, something that
Hmm.
she uses routinely in her practice, and I wanted to go look this up. So just a quick search on PubMed or just simple Google. There's a good amount of evidence looking into that, and again into some pretty stringent journals, so not to be dismissed. Again, so just going to talk about a quick review article that I found. This was in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences. The primary author was Haru Yamamoto, published in July of this year, 2021. And so in this one, they basically looked at hydrogen water as a novel therapeutic for treating pre-symptomatic diseases. So what does that mean? Well, there's this concept in Chinese medicine called, oh man, I'm gonna ruin this, Mibu. And what it basically means is pre-symptomatic diseases. So as Catharine Arnston said, right, we've got these silent killers in our body. It doesn't show up immediately prime shipping on your door, right? You've got things that are lingering for years and years and years, and then they become symptomatic and sometimes irreversible, unfortunately. Um, and what we believe is that a lot of these chronic illnesses that are affecting, causing comorbidities and mortality in today's day and age are the root cause of this chronic inflammation, right? For instance, cardiovascular disease, again, diabetes, perhaps cancer, chronic kidney disease, Alzheimer's, some strokes that because of atherosclerosis. And so they looked at, hey, how can hydrogen water be a therapeutic agent against chronic inflammation? So a really cool article and really dives deep in. So I want you to probably, whenever your best time to read this kind of stuff is, get your coffee and check it out. We'll link it.
Hmm.
But in a nutshell, what they talk about in the mechanisms is that H2, it plays a role as a selective scavenger for hydroxyl radicals, and they can prevent a host of pathogenesis and reduce reactive oxygen species. A cool thing about H2 is, right, it's permeable throughout the body, throughout the bloodstream, throughout the cells, so it can travel all around the body freely and inhibit the oxidative stresses by limiting the ROS in various cells. And so that's why it can work on a host of things, whereas
Hmm.
a lot of our pharmacological agents are very selective, right? You have blood pressure,
Yeah.
you can work on the endothelial, you can work on the kidneys and stuff like that, whereas H2 can kind of spread out through the thing. So
Wow.
I thought that was
That's pretty
really
cool.
awesome. And again, there are also other papers looking specifically at one variable, like for instance, and there was another study in OncoTarget I saw that looking at maybe it was some type of liver cancers, but it was definitely like looking at for cancer specifically. But this one was just a general review article talking about mechanisms, which for me I always like to start is how does something work before like looking at the applications and whatnot.
Right.
I thought that was cool, man. Super awesome. I got to look more
That
into it
is.
though.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you heard the episode where Tracy brings on that PhD researcher from Europe to
I don't think
talk
so.
about everything about hydrogen. Oh yeah, she has an
Is that
episode. I'll
right?
send it to you. Yeah, all
Okay.
everything about hydrogen. That's his
We
research. He
should
looks
link
at
it.
hydrogen water.
We'll link
Yeah,
it.
I'll
Yeah.
put it in here too. Yep. Cool. Anything else?
No, I think we burnt people out with our a bit of philosophy and a lot of science. There's like a
I
bunch of
like it.
papers. But yeah, hopefully people will enjoy it. And like I mentioned, my request for anybody listening is if you have found a good algae resource or something that you find, or let us know. I'm curious, and yeah, love to hear that.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, three awesome guests, three awesome episodes. So hope you guys all enjoy them. And as always, reach out to us with any questions, any recommendations, anything like that. So cool. All right. Till next time.
See you, bud.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you want to take a deeper dive into the topics that we talked about today, then make sure to check out the show notes where we posted articles as well as the research papers for you all to check out. And as always, please take 10 seconds of your time and leave us a review or rate this podcast. It helps us out greatly so that more people can find our podcast and listen to the great info that we have to provide. And for doctors, the story has changed. Visit financialresidency.com/locum story to see if a locum tenens assignment is right for you. It's here you'll find the unbiased answers you are after, so you can decide if locum tenens is your next chapter. And as always, our disclaimer, everything in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, and we are not providing medical advice. No physician-patient relationship is formed, and anything discussed in this podcast does not represent the views of our employers. We recommend that you seek the guidance of your personal physician regarding any specific health-related issues. And we will see you next week with another awesome episode. Have a great one.